Buenos dias. It's wonderful to be here, Gloria Perez, and I'm so honored to be with this wonderful panel. It's going to be my job to really kind of stay out of their way so they can share their expertise. But really, our objective this morning is to share a couple of things. One, just to discuss our experiences and share best practices about how to elevate Latinas and close the wage and achievement gap. Now, as the CEO of the Women's Foundation in Minnesota, which is a statewide community foundation, we believe that the more we can value and invest community-centered solutions, that the more that we can invest in the lives of the people who are at the center of problems, we can solve our solutions. And we are really believers that problems and solutions are found in the same place, and that if we are going to move forward, that we need to build power with the people who are most impacted by injustices. On average, a lot of data has already been shared, but I wanted to point out that women in Minnesota lose an estimated $447,960 in lifetime earnings due to the gender wage gap. This is all Minnesota women. Women of color and Native American women experience even greater losses. The nationally recognized Equal Pay Day, which was on March 15th, recognizes how far women, on average, must work in the next year in order to make what an average white man made in the previous year. At the Women's Foundation, we recognize Equal Pay Day for each of our cultural communities. And this year, as I think has probably been shared before, Equal Pay Day for Latinas isn't until December 8th. And that's a whole month later than it was last year because of the pandemic and the many shifting responsibilities that we have seen within the community. So at the Women's Foundation, we're conducting research every 2 years, and we argue, again, that we have to center those who are impacted the most. And so when we talk about economic justice, we want to center Latinas in the work that we do. Latinas are earning 55 cents on the dollar. In order to create real and lasting solutions, we've got to center their needs. And I will say that Black and Native American women aren't far behind at about 61 cents on the dollar. So through the pandemic, we have seen how the work that we do has impacted our families. Women are at the center of families. We are caregivers of both children and elders, and many women are in service and professional service industries, caregivers and service industries. And so 1 in 3 work in service fields where benefits are scarce, and for white women, it's only 1 in 5. So what we're here to think about is how do we change the responsibility and the conversation for addressing these disparities, and how can we rethink our roles as employers, as leaders in nonprofit and government, so that we can begin to shift the burden from Latinas and they can not only have equal pay, but also have opportunity to acquire wealth. And so with that, I want to begin the conversation with our panelists. And again, thank you so much for joining us here today. And I want to start with Patty Tototzintle, who is a mentor, and I don't have many opportunities to honor Patty publicly, but she was laughing earlier about how when we met in the early 90s that she was encouraging me to get involved in the Latino community as a leader, and I was just really reluctant. I didn't want to step forward, and it was Lupe Serrano, one of our friends who has since passed, and Patty, that encouraged me to step forward and really elevate my voice and have the confidence that I could bring not only my culture, but my knowledge to benefit the community at large. And so I have deep gratitude for Patty for that, and I think we should give her a round of applause. Because this is what we're looking for, right? So Patty, I'd love for you to share what cultural, societal, and economic situations have inspired you to do the work that you do. And then, what have you learned as you've been leading across Minnesota all these years?
Okay, thank you, Gloria. And we had to encourage Gloria because I needed someone to follow me as I moved to different places. I knew she would be there, and she was. So I appreciate you, Gloria. Well, I grew up and still live in the same neighborhood in St. Paul, the West Side. Many of you who don't live on the West Side will call it the South Side of the city, but it's really the West Side. And just to show my ties to my family, is I live in my grandmother's house, which it's a double house, and I grew up on one side with my family, and my grandmother, who was the matriarch, and my tío and my tía, cousins, lived on the other side. So my daughter, before she passed away, lived in her grandmother's house. So we were like in the same house, back and forth amongst us. And so that tells you a little bit about me right there. I was very blessed to grow up in a very traditional Mexican-American household. And all of our traditions, our holidays, from, tamales and rosary on New Year's Eve with my grandmother. And we did not go out on New Year's Eve. It didn't matter how old we are. As long as we lived at home, we were expected to be next door with grandma, with la abuelita. And so it wasn't until I was probably 17 that I could actually not be at home for the rosary. So, and so my children grew up the same way. I have 4 children. They are now all in their 40s. I'd love to say in their early 40s, but that wouldn't be true. So, and they grew up in a very traditional Mexican-American household, as their father is from Mexico. But for me, my mother was very strong. All of the women in the family were very strong, and that influenced me from the time I was very, very young. When I went to kindergarten, I spoke Spanish, very bilingual. And in kindergarten, my neighbors, my friends that we grew up with, and we all spoke Spanish, were told we could no longer speak Spanish, not even on the playground. So that impacted me a lot. And my parents complied, which each one of us started to lose our Spanish as we got into school. So my mother always said, it doesn't mean you have to lose it, it just means you have to treat it differently. And so she was very matter of fact, and that helped me growing up. The other thing, because there were such strong women in the family, all of them said, you can do anything you want to do. We might not be able to help you do it. And so that was always a message, and I think that was a strong message for me. My mother had an 8th grade education, and she went back years later and got her GED, and we were all there to support her in doing that. But she would say, I only went to 8th grade, mija. That does not mean you can't go further. And I can't show you how to take those jobs that you're going to take. You're going to have to learn them, but you have to learn them. And so all that influenced me to try new things growing up. I went away to college, to the University de las Americas in Cholula, Puebla, Mexico, thinking I would, again, fully master and be fluent in Spanish. I was studying anthropology. I loved archery. I learned archery when I was at school. And I ended up meeting my husband and dropping out of school. And we had 4 children pretty much in succession. And by then we were back here in St. Paul living in my mother's house for a while. So those messages really helped me. When I started to get involved in community, it was hard. I mean, it's hard work. It's hard work working in neighborhood. That was my volunteer job, working in the neighborhood. And sometimes you come up against people who really don't trust you. And I found that very hard coming out of a family and extended community that embraced me all the time. And so I would go home and I'd tell my mom these stories, and she said, no one ever said it was going to be easy, mija. But you have to do it because you're not here just for yourself, and you're not here just for your family. You're here for community. And I've never, ever forgotten that. And I think those messages and the fact that I had to learn kind of financial security on my own, because my family embraced the fact that we need to know our family in California and in Texas. So every summer we went on a road trip. 6 of us children with my parents. And that's how they showed us family. But it also meant that they didn't have financial security. So that was a message they gave to us, that we needed to have financial security. So I think some of it was that I had to learn it, and I did. And I embraced it. And many of the jobs I took, there was no one to show me it because there was no one there that had that job before me. And I would say that's a lesson that I've learned.
Thank you so much. I mean, that resilience that you saw in your family and then that was cultivated in you, I remember telling my mother I wanted to go to college, and she said, sí, deberías ir. You should. And she's like, pero no te puedo ayudar. I can't help you fill out an application. I don't have any money. But like, yes, you definitely should. So that really resonates with me. Thank you. Gayle, let's talk about corporate America and the role that you've played as an ally to so many people of color, and what do you see as the role of corporate America and some maybe tools or systems that can help Latinas advance?
Thank you so much. I'm so taken by Patty's story and the authenticity of it. I actually felt unqualified to be here today. I'm not a Latina leader. But I do believe in lifting up underrepresented populations, men and women, especially women in STEM, because I'm a market researcher by background. And I built humbly shared with you the Insights and Analytics Department at General Mills. I was there over 3 decades. And I have a different kind of diversity story. I was the only woman on the leadership team for 19 years. I had to stand on the shoulders of men, and they lifted me up. And one of my messages is sponsorship and mentorship. And I would invite each of you to look down, across, and up in your organization and find someone and compliment them today. Because there are too many people, and I thought about what I want to impart to you in a short period of time. Too many people, and over the course of my career, thousands of employees, when they leave, all of a sudden everyone is telling them how great they are, right? Anybody had that experience? That's not the time. And if you really want to increase the representation and lift up and advance your organization like Mike Roman does, that he shared with us this morning, and for the success of corporations like this amazing one that we're at today, 3M, then what you really need to do is actually build representation and stand up for the next generation and the leaders. And so what I was able to do over the course of my career is increase my group's diversity by 4-fold. And the most important thing is to increase the retention to 85%. So I want you all to think about not recruiting and not just counting, because we heard all kinds of statistics this morning. And my first take on, I'm not qualified to speak, is I have to do some research because I'm a researcher. But it kind of occurred to me maybe, and one of my colleague speakers and I were chatting, I didn't really need to look at all the data. We heard all that this morning. There's no question, the numbers don't lie, but the facts are that people make decisions, data doesn't. Every single one of you can look out into your organization and talk to people, look to both sides of you. So one of the questions posed is, what are the tools and resources? They're right here in the room today. And they're back at your now virtual desk, right? They're on your next Zoom call. But the most important lesson I learned is, if I wanted to increase the Latine population in my organization, I'm now on the board of Centro, and I go in as a learner with humility, empathy, and curiosity. I really needed to listen to my Latine employees. And so at a certain point, I had a big learning lesson, and I realized that I needed to ask them for what they needed and how to gather the next generation. So in the best practice world, what I offer you is retention bonuses. That's what I did. I offer you recruitment bonuses, and when my employees found someone that actually made it through the interviewing and was able to be hired in the organization, then they got actually remunerated in some way for helping increase the diversity in our organization, and they built the network. But wouldn't you stay somewhere where there were colleagues that you had some affinity for and some connectivity to? That's how you build an organization. And then I'd like to say, close the gap. There's a value gap. It's not just a wage gap. The value gap it's pure economics. It's what is the value of this employee. And I'm not looking for equity. I was asked to be on a panel, actually at a conference that I initially met Claudia at. and the panel was on gender equity. And I really struggled with it. I wore the white dress like everybody was wearing white that day. I did what I was supposed to do, and it was a panel of women. But I couldn't help myself. I started by saying, I'm actually not looking for equity. I'm looking for advancement. So I want you all to leave thinking about how to advance the next generation, how to advance your Latine population, and how to lift up someone, one person. Didn't someone help each one of you and each one of us? I can tell you, and I can tell you who it was. And some of the who's are in this room for me. And then listening to your story, tell your story and listen to your story, and there's no better story that I've heard than the one next to me this morning.
Thank you, Gayle. That's just beautiful. Thank you. Emilia, talk to us a little bit about what you hear from young Latinas about what they need. Does this, what Gayle has said, resonate with you? What would you add?
Well, thank you so much. And I will just begin by saying that here, Patty just summoned the abuelitas. And that is part of a very relevant conversation in how we relate as Latinas into the workplace. One thing that I tell myself is my abuelita didn't go for what she went through for me to play small. And that is my thank you guys. So that is my continuous reminder of that I'm not seeking a pathway. We're not carving opportunities for us to be liked. We're carving opportunities for us to close gaps and find respect. So respect is also an institutional value. If you're being paid less, there is some institutional reform, some institutional readjustment of how we are being respected in our knowledge and our experience and our expertise at the workplace. So beyond that, I think that I'm seeing more and more young Latinas being super clear about their experiential knowledge as folks that might not know what it was to have a parent that went to an Ivy League and help you get in the top LSATs or the top SAT scores, or had the money to help you do it, but how that relatedness, finding networks, being supportive, and moving in a caring way is helping you shape the workplace as it is. We are moving beyond culture, language, in global or transnational perspective from a place of folk into a place of actual knowledge and experience. And when we're talking about transnational organizations or transnational corporations, that means a lot. The experience of a Latino in Minnesota or in the US is not the same as the experience of the Mexicano in Mexico. So how are we using our code switching to be able to foster that knowledge and tap on our shared well-being? Our shared well-being can look different for different people, but at the end of the day, we all want main basic things. We want good shelter, we want to have opportunities, we want to be cultivated and growth, and we want to have goodwill and like a caring surrounding. That is also for me to acknowledge that younger Latinas, in my experience, have more historical memory. This means we understand that, for example, in my case, for Emilia to exist, there had to be, like Patty, I was just telling Patty that she carved the way for me to exist. And also Ruby Lee and Rosa Talk, we are not the beginning of a story, we are part of a story that will continue beyond us. So that historical memory is important in terms of how we are winning in the public arena for women and gender systemic opportunities and challenges. So what we're seeing today is that we have some protections at the workplace that have been earned by women in the labor movement. Being able to have collective bargaining was a value that got us to a 40-hour payday, to get us to benefits, to get us to being able to have medical insurance and not being exploited consistently and without accountability. Those are things that we earn through historical memory. And then additionally, we're getting more and more young women that are very clear about the need of a caring economy, because the caring work goes often undervalued, underpaid, or unpaid. And if we don't have the right institutions that can help us in the caring of our environment, the caring of our siblings, the caring of the humans around us, most likely women will end up doing that work unpaid, unrecognized, and undervalued. So it's a self-interest. If you are a woman, I invite you to care about the caring economy, and we can talk more about that in some other occasion. And finally, I'm seeing more and more young women being super clear about power. Yeah. So power is not necessarily my poder, quiero hacer, of wanting to do, but to actually own the power, the influence to change conditions. So there's institutional power. If you have a high position of power, you hold institutional power with that. What are you doing to carving openings for women and women of color and Latinas to have their experience as a value and as an asset at the workplace? And also in the public arena, how are you building collective power for that caring economy that we know it's in our self-interest as women to work for? Finally, I will say that this part of accountability, we hear a lot of conversations of accountability. What does that look like? That means being in relatedness with a multi-generational array of Latinas. I know, as I mentioned, that I could not do the work that I'm doing if Ruby Lee and Rosa and Patty wouldn't happen to do the work that they do and open the path for me, but also being accountable to a younger generation of Latinas. What does accountable mean? It means that they can tell me if I'm not doing things right. They can help me set up an agenda. They have an open door policy in which my comfort is not at the center of the conversation. It is the work. I can choose to take it personal or not. My job is to not take it personal and look at the opportunities in the horizon. At the end of the day, we all want to be okay. We all want to have opportunities. We all want our families to thrive, to have a decent education, to explore their gifts and put those gifts into persuasion of a better world for all of us. And it's up to us to do that work together, and especially knowing that one size does not fit all. So we are the designers, the architects of those pathways for Latinas, young Latinas, immigrant Latinas, low-wage Latinas, Latinas in STEM, Latinas that care about the environment or climate change. So I am hopeful for the future, and hope is also a discipline. There's this quote that says, hope is an axe, and that you use it to break the door in case of an emergency. I don't remember who said that, but it's probably somebody in theology because I read a lot of theology. But I believe that hope is a discipline. It is an axe in which you use that axe to break the door in case of an emergency. So my invitation is how are we moving in that hope discipline? And how are we inviting others to work and move in that hope discipline together?
Thank you, Emilia. That is just awesome. And thank you for not playing small and for owning your power and your voice.
Mi abuelita me dijo que no, so I'm not playing small.
There you go. Yeah, you don't want to upset her. Absolutely not. Carla, we heard a little bit earlier from the conversation that narrative is really important, to think about narrative change. And again, that Latinos are not just good consumers. We have so many other gifts and assets to bring to an economy. So what are some harmful narratives that you think we can overcome, or some positive narratives that we can reinforce so that we can close that wage gap?
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me in this panel. I'm beyond honored to be here. So I wanted to invite you to do like a little exercise. And I want you to think about a leader, visualize a leader. Very likely you will think about this one person at the top of the mountain, reaching the impossible. Colonialism has highlighted those type of leaders that are inhuman, that are superheroes. And it has also pushed the fallacy of fair competition, the survival of the fittest, and that we have an even playing field. And actually, like those heroes, like Superman, so Superman right now should be 85. Superman left us with problems. So they just fix the problem quickly, but they destroy everything around them. They have no relationships, conflicted families. They have no long-term solutions. They come, show up, break up everything, and go back home. We don't need that right now. We need superheroes that are not superheroes and that look more like Latinas. Superman is 84, America Chavez is 11. So Marvel took 70, almost 60 some years to figure out that they needed a Latina superhero. But this Latina superhero appeared in Vengeance in 2011 and was created by Joe Casey and Nick Dragora, so not by Latina women. And so we need to craft our own stories. We cannot let these boys at Marvel define us. So we were taught that in order to be successful, we need to look like those white men, heterosexual, cisgender white men, and that we need to assimilate to be able to be successful as Latina leaders. So hide that you're Latina, basically. But actually, Latinas are really successful leaders. And I just wanted to point out the research that Patricia Conde-Brooks has done on cultural scripts of Latinas. It is available online because it is open source, so you can talk to Patricia Conde-Brooks, Dr. Patricia Conde-Brooks, or just go there and read. It's 177 pages. I read it. It's a delight. And so Latinas are not seen as leaders. They don't see themselves as leaders, and representation matters. It really, really matters. They need to see others doing that same work in order to feel like I can do that work. So imagination, as we were using the imagination, and Dr. used the imagination today to think about, how can we imagine an America that is mostly, predominantly Latina, U.S., Latin. How do you say, like Latin America? Do you say Latin America if the U.S. becomes mostly Hispanic? So what we have as leaders is we have our Latinidad. So Latinidad brings us leadership styles that operate from collective orientation. We work really well as a collective. We bring people in, and we need that. We are amazing at being servant leaders. We have integrity. We are committed to work ethics, and we are oriented to service. What's better than a leader that looks like that works like that? We are more likely to be viewed as transformational or participative leaders. We value belonging to collaborative groups, and also we create collaborative groups. And we believe in expansive power. And what's the best way to think about benefiting our own community and going beyond our community? So we can create transgenerational solidarity by having this family framework of relationships and networking, as if we are, even like if we are in the office, we create our little families. Like we feel these connections. So at LatinoLEAD, where I work, we have the Avanzando Liderazgo program. It's a program for emerging and established leaders, and 9 of the 12 participants are women. LatinoLEAD is an organization that all its staff are women. We have the education action team, where the vast majority of the team are women. So we can create change. We, women leaders, Latina leaders, have a lot to give. And so we only need the chance and to see ourselves in those positions. So the last thing that I wanted to say is that we don't really need lone rangers to do the work and take us to the top. We need relationships, we need collective and collaborative powers, and that is what Latina leaders provide. Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting us to imagine and dream. I think that's just beautiful. Really appreciate what you've said. Silvia, we'd love to hear what has worked for you in your career, what you think about what was just said about narratives and the ways in which we can support Latinas to advance economically in all areas of life.
Thank you. Thank you, Gloria. I am so honored to be here with these amazing women, this powerful. If you could just Google each of them, you will be surprised if you don't know already who they are. But it's just an honor. And again, Gloria as well. I want to recognize Yali. Yali is the woman behind this. Of course, it's Claudia's vision. But Yali is the woman that remotely from Mexico put together this. So I think she deserves a huge recognition. Yali, thank you. Thank you for being the leader behind this. And thank you, Gloria. Thank you, Claudia, for putting us together, for bringing us together today. Again, this is just a little bit of what women can accomplish. And I'm going to Gayle, I thank you for being here because your perspective brings a different reality for us. And having your support means a lot because this is about supporting each other. For me, I was in the Foreign Service. I was a diplomat, but I was a diplomat with a very imposter syndrome. I thought that I needed to climb the ladders by gaining more academic credentials and a portfolio that can probably make me become the president of the world. I got that in my brain, and I kept going and kept doing, and it was just never ending. And guess what? At the end, I thought, this is the system. I cannot go against the system. And what worked for me was gender organizing. Getting together. It doesn't matter who you are, or every little and big leader, or young leader, or senior leader brings something to me, has brought something to me. Listening to this young woman brought a lot to me today. Listening to my kids, to my daughter has brought a lot. But I guess for me, my leadership comes from the strength of the culture. We are so amazingly powerful. Every single conversation that I've had with the culture, the women culture, it doesn't matter if you're a Latina or if you are an African American or if it's the women power that brings, and we all have to walk this journey together if you want to make an impact. That's number one. The gender organizing piece, the mentorship. Mentorship from men. There is a man here that helped me create my business, two men actually, Mark Ricci and Marco Ortiz. Marco, thank you, because Marco believed in me, and he said, when I presented the idea of what I'm doing, he said, go for it. And that's, that's the unity, that's the togetherness of a culture, but it's the togetherness of we are all human. What is this about? We are all human, we all need each other. The third one is a sponsorship. I needed a sponsor. I couldn't have done this without the sponsorship of women that had already walked the journey and had made it to the top. And and be open to learn, be humble, remain humble, because in the way you can lose your perspective by remaining humble and remaining open to learn from seniors to juniors and to everyone in between. It has worked immensely for me. And what I do right now is something that probably looks very big, very impossible, but I know that right now I'm advocating for more women and minorities in bilateral trade and investment across North, Central, and South America. But it's small to small. I'm promoting that small to small means small business to small business. The COVID left us a huge lesson. Corporations, big corporations are going to remain big, but the ones who make the difference, the ones who are feeding the world are the small people, the small businesses, the entrepreneurs, the startups. So, and probably you don't know, but 60% of the products that are consumed at the table come from other parts of the world, including your own hometowns back in Latin America or in the small African towns. Coffee comes from Latin America, from Africa, the cocoa that you consume. And you know who harvests those products? Women. 60% of women are working on that. And guess who make the money? Who are the 2.5% of the population in the world, which is comprised by either men or women that have inherited that business. So let's change the narrative. Let's think a little bit further, and let's support. I have a great program. You can all be involved. You can all be ambassadors to your countries of origin, and just by saying, hey, this cocoa, this product, this banana comes from where I come from, or from where my family comes from.
Thank you so much. I think we hear a theme here about being seen, stepping up, owning our power, owning our culture, and instead of being apologetic for the fact that maybe we don't know how the system works, I often think that can be a benefit, because the system has not worked for us. It has not worked for Black, Indigenous people of color, and we need to start disrupting that system. And so whatever idea or thought that you might be having to disrupt, go for it. Test it with somebody else and see if they'll support you in that disruption. I know that we have just a few more minutes, so calls to action I think have been sort of coming throughout, but I am just going to go down the line. Another call for action that people can take in terms of owning their power and using their position and their place in family and community to make a difference and change the system. What would you say, Carla?
So what I would say is BIPOC communities, Latinas mostly, we don't have structures, so we depend on people a lot. So continue building those relationships, reach out to those that have a lesser level of seniority in your roles, in your positions, in your organizations, and connect with them and try to expand the network down, because that would make a huge difference on those folks. So that's my recommendation.
Thank you. Pati?
I would say do what you're good at. Share what you're good at. Bring others into doing what you're good at. I'm good at leadership development. I've created leadership development programs. I've co-created leadership development programs. Now Esperanza United has leadership development programs for youth, for women, for men, and boys, et cetera. But we just created a new leadership development program for Latinas that are pursuing public policy and research. Awesome. There are not enough Latinas. So do what you're good at and bring others into that.
Thank you. Yes, Gayle.
So I would say take a stand and make a bold move. My CEO at Centro, Roxana Linares' story is really fascinating. When she first got her job 2 decades ago, it's not that long ago when you hear the numbers, she found that the average employee made $14 an hour. However, all the teachers, and we have Montessori schools at Centro, made $6 an hour. She didn't look at resumes. She didn't investigate the backgrounds of any of the teachers. She just took them all to $14 an hour the minute she got her job. Yeah. Every one of you has a chance to take a stand. Those children are being educated. They need to have teachers that are well remunerated. It just, for me, is a very powerful example of one small step you can take. And I want to close my comments by saying, one of the things that I've lived by, I've been called courageous. You can decide. I thought it was naivete and inexperience at the time. But the really key point is, so many times I actually lived by ask forgiveness, not permission.
Love that. Thank you, Emilia.
So I have a couple of action items. One is for the private arena. We heard about this imposter syndrome, and it's there's workshops and all kinds of support about that. And one of the breakthroughs that I've had with some of my peers recently is it really imposter syndrome, or is it my body, my trauma, my emotional intelligence telling me that I don't fit in that mold, that mold was not built for me, and I am trying to fit in a mold that does not have my assets in mind, and what am I gonna do to shape my own mold, or not have a mold? How am I gonna step into that power, being my true whole self? And the other, it's the public arena call to action. I think it's really important for us, as we're talking about Latina Pay Day, to get really deep into the ins and outs of workplace segregation. It deeply affects in exacerbated numbers to Latinas, especially Latinas that are in the food industry. We all know and love somebody that has sustained food and has been part of a mass production line of food for us to be here. So how are we going to invest time and capacity to disrupt those systems? Because it is a segregational problem. And get involved, run for office. We have in the room Senator Patricia Torres-Rey, and we need more people to step into that public arena, leading the public arena, but also build more intentional networks that have our collective well-being in mind.
Thank you so much. That's terrific. Silvia, last words.
Empowerment through mentorship and sponsorship. If you really want to make a difference in the community, whether you are a man or a woman, doesn't matter. We all need each other.
Thank you to the panel. Thank you to all of you for listening. Just remember, our well-being is inextricably connected, and have a great rest of the conference. Thank you.